Well, it is time for another Voices of Video interview, and I'm so excited to have back Stefan Ideler from i3d.net. Stefan, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be back, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah. So, it's been, I guess about 6 or 8 weeks since we recorded our last interview, and a lot has happened. We were at NAB, had a phenomenal show. How was the show for you guys?
It's Vegas, so we definitely enjoyed it. We,
That's right. That's right.
yeah, for us it
Well,
was a
but what
great
about the
success.
business?
Well, we, as IFD, we were not very much known into this specific market, right? So we always originate from the gaming ecosystem. So we used to show to share knowledge, try out pitches. Obviously, what resonates? Do the arguments from the gaming industry resonate at NAB, or do we need to adjust the pitches a little bit? We did get a lot of information about the ecosystem, and in a way, it's about the ecosystem is not that much different from gaming. You have a few large players who dominate the industry, and in both of the industries, we are trying to break the status quo, right?
That's right.
To offer
Yeah.
advantages to clients. Yeah.
Well, you have a different approach, which we're going to get into. But for those listeners who may not actually be familiar, maybe they didn't hear our first interview and they're saying, i3D, who is this company? What do you do? Why don't you give the elevator pitch, the elevator presentation of, who you are and what you're doing in media and entertainment?
Yeah. So IFCD, we were founded more than 20 years ago, and we see ourselves as the scaling experts. So we scale complex solutions with compute, network, anything infrastructure related on a global scale. And we try to support you and your business the best possible way, 24/7 with it, by taking your worries away and making sure it's fixed before it even reaches you. So we do this by making sure we're everywhere globally at all the big metros, so we can serve our users in the most quick, efficient way possible. And especially also having the network connecting all of these sites together, so we can gain tremendous insights, cost advantages, and performance advantages compared to the other solutions out there. Combine those things together and you have an ideal solution, which worked really well for us in the games industry, where we work with all the major game publishers and game companies out there, and also in the video, voice, streaming industry, where players such as a Discord users for all of the services worldwide.
Yeah. Your roots in gaming is, I think, definitely unique and also sets you apart because I can't think of a more demanding user than a gamer.
Yeah, you're totally correct. Gamers are the most demanding users in, I would say, the internet world.
In the internet world, that's right.
Their choice of ISP depends on how well is this connected to the games that I play, that I enjoy to consume. Yeah. They are extremely critical to get the pitchforks out on Twitter or X and other social platforms. And from a game company perspective, it's so crucial to inform the gamers as quickly and as accurately as possible in what is going on.
Yeah.
And that's why you need to work with partners who can help you on that front.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, you already mentioned Discord, and I don't think that everyone inside the video community actually realizes how big Discord's video platform is. Are you able to share even some kind of rough ballpark numbers of, how many concurrent users and how many streams are being supported? Because I know I was a little surprised when I learned.
So it's mind-boggling. I know most people's social life nowadays, especially the younger generation, especially since COVID, is on Discord. So we're talking about millions and millions of concurrent streams. Concurrent users. Yeah. People watching movies together on stream, doing their daily chores together on stream, playing games together on stream. Yeah. Even when I go home from work, I join Discord on a call and talk to my users. So the scale is as big as some of the other largest known streaming solutions out there. And because the majority of Discord users at least originated from gaming, these people were also extremely critical on the performance.
Yes. Yeah, getting back to they'll bring out the pitchforks if
exactly.
if something stops working or the quality is not up to their expectation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to highlight that because, you said, hey, we've been around 20 years, we're kind of big. We have a lot of points of presence. But again, I think you should actually throw out some numbers. Like, how big is your pop footprint? It's my understanding, if you're not the largest, you're like maybe the second largest in the world. So maybe you can let us know.
It's more than 65 points of presence, so where we have machines, network equipment, and so on. If you look at the network itself, it's right now, when I last checked today, it's the second most peered network in the world. So that means we have the highest number of interconnections with other networks directly, to also ensure that we have a direct point of contact, that we always know where the traffic goes, and we cut out the middleman as much as possible. Because if there's a middleman between our servers and the end user, it's also a black hole of information that you cannot easily access, and that delays the whole process to get information and ensure the quality. In terms of capacity, well, let's just say in gaming, we've also learned that gamers are very fanatical and like to attack things if they disagree. So we had to build out a lot of external capacity, ranging in the nearly hundreds of terabits a second of capacity to soak these kind of attacks, which means that it helps to be able to deal with these kind of situations.
Yeah. So, I think the point here, the main takeaway is when you talk about scale, this is not just marketing use of the word. Scale is always thrown out. Oh, we built our system for scale. It's like, go to everyone's website. It says, scalable video or scalable, fill in the blank. But you've really done it. There's real hardware sitting in real data centers all across the world. You have peering arrangements and peering agreements in place. The second most peering agreements, according to what you just said, of anyone else. So I think this is a really interesting foundation, to expand into, shall I say, more traditional video streaming, from your core business, which is gaming.
Yeah.
So, why don't you explain what your offer is? Because it's also, in my mind, a little bit different, and different in a good way. But I think the industry needs to really understand what you guys are bringing, because you're actually more than just a CDN.
Correct.
You're more than just a cloud. You're a CDN plus a cloud, but you're different. So explain this.
Yeah, sometimes we say we're built different. Sorry, I had to use that one. So you're correct. If you look at compares to the current ecosystem, right? You're with one of the two dominant players or one big cloud provider. You're pretty much locked in. You enjoy a lot of convenience and flexibility, but you're also a little bit stuck and also at the mercy of the provider you're with, in case they want to give you more discounts next year or not. So how do we compare to that? Just like with the cloud, you can also have flexible compute with us. You provision it through Terraform at the locations that you need it, which is, okay, so far so good. And then the networking parts is where it becomes a little bit different. The networking that we have is by default built for the premium use case. So to make sure that the traffic is as close to the user as possible and it travels as directly as possible, as far as we can carry the bits and bytes. By cloud by default, you don't really have that behavior. When they receive the bits and bytes from your server, they just want to throw it out over the fence to the next party as soon as possible, so they don't have to pay the price to transport your bits and bytes all the way across the world. Now, cloud also has a product which does do that. For example, a global acceleration or Google Premium Networking. But if you compare our offering to that offering, you see like a 10x difference in terms of egress pricing. So that's a big incentive to look into. Maybe you right now with a single provider, you're a bit overcommit. And there's a big incentive to then start looking into maybe using us as a hybrid model, starting a little bit with the commit that you spend anyway, and then see if it performs as good as we claim it is, and see if we can make a difference in both on performance, but also of course on the costs that you pay per user to serve them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's, it's really interesting. Terms like the hybrid cloud, or multi CDN, and all the variations, of those two, phrases or terms have been used for years. Some people have actually gone out and developed and done the work, to deploy multiple CDNs and, with varying degrees of success. There are certainly case studies that show that there's definite benefits, maybe cost reduction, maybe performance advantage, or sometimes even both. But for every case study, that shows it's a success, there's probably an equal number or more who will say, well, we tried it, but we ran into, any number of difficulties. But it's interesting what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that on one hand, yes, the market needs and wants convenience. They want packaged solutions. And that's why, again, if, at NAB, you walk around the show floor and everything is marketed as a solution, as a platform. Certainly, I think buyers are, on a surface level, they're drawn to that because it's easy, right? Oh, wow, I can get everything from one vendor, or I can get, rather than having to piece together multiple solutions, I can get it all from this vendor, and then I can go to another vendor to get the other major components. And, it quote simplifies my life. But people are also realizing exactly what you just said, a minute ago, is that now I've got vendor lock-in. Now I'm stuck with that solution, right? Now, what do I do if my requirements don't align with the roadmap of this solution provider? Maybe I want to integrate a codec and they say, that's not really on our roadmap because we don't have sufficient demand for it. Maybe there's a new technology. There's a lot of things. And again, there's competition, right? Just because I'm a big service and I want to do something doesn't mean that my competitor wants to do the same, and if we're both happen to be running on this same platform, then guess what? Maybe I lose and I don't get what I need. So we at NETINT are seeing this very, 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 very plainly. And one of the things that we're excited about in working with i3D is that we're going to be able to bring this idea of this flexible infrastructure, this bare metal, but more than just the boxes in a data center. Boxes that somebody can actually go off and now deploy what they need when they need it. And so I'm curious, if you have any references or case studies or user stories, even from the gaming world, maybe, where you're doing that, where you're building a somewhat bespoke platform that exactly meets the needs of that of that particular service or platform. Can you share with the audience, how you've done that and where that's been successful, that approach?
Sure. I also was thinking about what you said earlier about the ecosystem and convenience, right? We also realized that instead of being a client with maybe the big cloud or the big provider directly, we see also, when we talked at the show floor, that many customers are clients of these service providers directly. And they kind of then depending on who they integrated with, then depends on where the infrastructure will actually go. So for us, it was also a very interesting discovery that we learned that one of the ways to keep the convenience for the customer is that if we also integrate with those service providers as an option, right? So you can still retain your convenience, but still also benefit from the cost differences. And of course, the service provider will take a cut, as it always goes in business, which is why companies exist.
Sure.
But it's still a big benefit. Now, as for your other question, we've also had a very nice use case with NETINT as well, with a client who is in the real-time videos. It's a real-time video streaming platform known for high quality, low latency live content with a lot of user interaction taking place as well. Yeah. I cannot mention the company name, obviously, but I can display some of the infrastructure components that they did. On one end, they work with GCP, with Kubernetes, storage, and machine learning workloads. And at ICD.net, they use that flexible compute for ingestion, these workloads, processing these, using the NetInt chipsets to encode and then deliver these video streams via MTP and WebRTC to the users. And it's a containerized architecture which spans over both providers, and to the outside world, it appears as a single unified cluster. So that's truly that hybrid model that we talk about. So they went from limitations that they had was being stuck with pretty high egress costs, which also limited the amount of R&D budget they had to innovate. A lock-in into that managed provider's environment. There was as always with any startup, your biggest constraint is the resources of your own team and finding great people to join your team, right? So
that's right.
Getting more resources available is always a good thing. And there was a lack of affordable, high performance storage outside of the cloud. So we solved that by providing these flexible bare metal machines, high performance, low cost for those RTC workloads and streaming sessions, together with the NetInt appliances. And then we enabled the hybrid architecture between the cloud provider and us. But all that heavy video traffic was routed through the ISD.NET locations to ensure the client could benefit from these significant cost advantages. So both the GPUs and the VPUs that we offered for the real-time transcoding and scaling proved to be a massive decision maker and plus side to the whole solution, and also the cost calculations between going from single provider to multi-provider hybrid cloud. And then there's some soft things around it, like being able to support the client. You don't have to talk to a ticket system. You talk to real people in a Slack channel. I'm in there as well. You can just tag me if something is wrong, and we'll look at it. Sure, I cannot clone myself indefinitely, but we try to support clients with our live ops team 24/7, the same way as how we would ourselves like to be supported. And that's something that we always keep thinking about. And when you talk to someone in a support call, that person should be able to fix like at least 95% of all the cases that they handle. So it's a one-step resolution. So ultimately, summarized on that, one hand, massive savings, always good. There's more operational stability because of the flexible infrastructure, right? You're no longer constrained to if it's going to be a success. No, I can scale up when I need to, and I scale it down when I need to as well. Where like 10 years ago with a traditional data center, that was not possible. You're always talking into month or many monthly contracts. No, nowadays, even with a data center, just like cloud, you can scale per hour and sometimes even per minute. Latency optimizations for the user, which is particularly important because of the interactivity required of the application. Now, I totally understand that's not a factor in all streaming solutions. Yeah, you have buffers to take on a lot of leeway for your network performance, but still, it's nice that it's relatively in sync, right? Because you don't want to be the person who notices 10 seconds later that the goal is scored and your neighbors are already cheering.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
it needs to be within reason or on par.
Sure.
And another big plus was that, yes, you can get NetInts at also other cloud providers, but they really liked that we had this partnership together to be able to move quickly when needed.
Yeah. I like I like that case study because it highlights a couple things that are just major trends. And if you think about what a trend is, I mean a trend is really just the signposts that a market has decided to go in a certain direction. That could be adopting a set of technologies. It could be using specific standards. It could be the way architectures, the way things are built. And this notion of moving from these bespoke individual package services, which were very convenient, and I think they were needed at a time.
100%.
You think 5 or 7 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, the concept of like an OVP, an online video platform, it wasn't just convenience, it was almost required, because unless you were Apple or YouTube, or Facebook, or Netflix, or a handful of other video platforms, like there weren't the engineers that you could hire to go build your workflow. So you had to go to these platforms. Well, now, as the market has evolved and grown, and as talent has been built, and engineers now have 10 years of experience building, and more even, building video streaming platforms, now it's actually very possible for small teams with
Yes.
the right infrastructure and the right engineering support to be able to go build exactly what they need, and to do it cost effectively, to save money in the process, and all of the benefits that we've already talked about, leaving the vendor lock in, leaving the high markups, because you are very, very correct. The dirty little secret, if we want to put it that way, is that, to start, it is very affordable. The cloud is very affordable, right? When you only have a small number of users and you're starting to scale, like, wow, the cloud is cheap. And it's true. It is,
It is.
relatively speaking. But what do you do when all of a sudden you've moved from several thousand users to 100,000 users? What do you do when you suddenly break 1 million users?
That,
What do
that
you do when you're suddenly at 10 million users, and that scale continues, and all of a sudden it's not affordable anymore?
No, and then you start to think about how do we get discounts. You start talking about year-long commits, and then ultimately you're stuck in the same position as you were 10 years ago with the data centers. When what you mentioned is completely correct, because over the past decade, also the technologies have become more standardized, right?
Yeah.
We've seen the move towards containerization. It's very easy to move applications
Exactly.
from one platform to another nowadays.
Yeah.
10 years ago, it wasn't there. So we saw the same in the gaming industry. 10 years ago, it was completely logical and made sense to move from the traditional cumbersome data center propositions towards the ultimate flexibility in cloud. But now, skip ahead a decade later, and you see that the data center propositions have also evolved to support and enable that hybrid business model.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like you need to hire 50 new engineers again to manage the same Kubernetes pods that you're already managing on your cloud instances. So in that regards, life has become easier. But I also very much understand that getting things to change also can take some time. Yeah.
There's a challenge, shifting mindsets,
Yes.
and shifting best practices. And, let's face it, one of the things too that, is very true, is that because we are now 20 years, the streaming video industry is more than 20 years old. As defined by, if you look back at the very, very first, internet streaming broadcast, we're coming up on really like 30 years, roughly. It was, 96, 97, certainly 98, even though it was postage sized video, 10 frames per second, 15 frames per second. So far from, what we have today, but yet it was like mind blowing, right? I can remember, seeing some of those early, I'm dating myself, but seeing some of those early internet streaming, video streaming broadcasts, if you want to call it that, and it was just mind blowing. Like, I'm watching this on the internet. What else could I do on the internet? Wow,
I have the same feeling, and I think with the generation of us, we've had the pleasure of seeing that whole evolution from nothing to where it is now. Same with games. When I started in my youth, the games, the monitor had one color; it was green.
Yeah.
Look what we have now, and it's the same with you can have your whole life literally on the internet, your job, your work, your social, your content, to consume content. It's mind blowing when you think about it, but it's also actually really cool that we can do.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it really is. Well, Stefan, we're very excited about the work that NETINT is doing with i3D. And, maybe you can give, where could listeners, viewers go to get more information, learn more about the company, learn more about the value proposition specifically in video streaming? Where would you send them?
Well, obviously, I would send them to our main website, i3d.net, and you can select on the different propositions there. And of course, I would also love to get in touch with you personally. You can reach out to me or one of my teams on LinkedIn. It's one of the special, like being at a company for 20 years, you do many, many different things, right? In the beginning, as a startup, you do everything. And ultimately, you find something what you enjoy most. And for me, it's the talking with customers and potential customers, figuring out what the problem is and what can we do to make your life easier for yourself, for your developers, but also for your players or your users. So I always love digging into new cases. So yeah, my LinkedIn inbox is open, and feel free to reach out.
I know you're active on LinkedIn, and anymore when people ask me like, well, how do people get in touch with you? I don't even bother with like, oh, here's my email address or whatever. It's like, just find me on LinkedIn.
Email doesn't work. It's LinkedIn and Slack essentially.
Yeah. That's exactly, or Discord, right?
Or Discord,
yeah. For you, not for me. I'm not quite that progressive yet, but I need to be. I will be. Well, in conclusion, I think, everybody's interested. We're all focused on, hey, what our needs are today. Where do I have a problem, and do you have a solution for me? And I think we should. I think that's the right perspective. If we're always living in the future, like, well, it's gonna be hard to get something done. But I think also people are very interested in how is the network evolving? And so I would like to end our discussion with, with your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on where you see the network, and I'll let you define network. However, I think of it as more than just CDN. And I don't want to say more because then I give away where I see it evolving, which I think is in alignment with where you see it evolving too. But how do you see the network evolving, in video, but, also gaming, but just in general? How do you see it evolving? What's it going to look like in let's not go too far out, but like in 3 years, what's the network going to look like?
Very good question. And I see it on multiple layers. So on the technical side of things, I believe the traffic is only going to grow and grow and grow. People are still consuming higher grade content on their TVs and mobile phones, even though they might not notice the difference between 4 and 8K. If the option is there, people will use it.
Yeah,
so
they usually want it.
They usually want it. So the demand on the infrastructure is going to keep growing, right? So that's point one. I also think that we ourselves will also be driven to be even closer to more users, and our users which might currently be more remote for now still. Like when I look at our current presence, there's still some relatively dark spots in Africa, in middle of America, where I think, or for example, the west coast of Australia, where I think we will also need to be able to really complete our offering. There's also a bit of a geopolitical factor going on, which is uncertainty in our business.
And is that like data sovereignty?
Data
that
sovereignty.
whole notion?
Where does the data live? What guarantees can you give? What does happen with my user data? These are all kinds of potential, both opportunities and problems, depending on how you look at it, depending on how it goes. But the uncertainty itself is what kind of makes long-term predictions a bit difficult. Which is also understandable why more and more companies faced with that uncertainty are looking at the bottom line and think, let's just go for safe, let's just go for costs. And I totally understand that reasoning, to have a little bit more buffer for you never know what's going to happen. So personally, I hope 3 years from now, the world will be more stable, so we don't have to worry about these kind of things. I think then we'll be mainly worrying how we can keep up with the growth and demand of all these applications. Also with AI, we are going to see a lot of AI workloads, which need to be as close to the compute and the users as possible, because users will be consuming content and playing games, for example, which will have these AI actors, AI teammates in your game, and that need to be as low latency as possible between the server processes and the AI. So I think that not just the bandwidth will increase, but also the power usage. There will be more heavier workloads in all the different POPs, even the smaller ones. So there's going to be a lot of infrastructural challenges. And I also think from NETINT's point of view, there will be also a lot more transcoding happening. To also, we see it already happening in the gaming niche, where some parts of the games are now being streamed.
Yeah,
when
that's
it's not
right.
an official cloud stream game, but they stream in the new updates, so people don't have to download it anymore. All to ensure the players are not disturbed, that the players retain the convenience to play. Because if they wait at the download screen, they're going to start up the other game and spend the money there. So there's a lot of future fun stuff coming. Yeah.
So a question then would be, do you, up until recently, and define recently as, I don't know, a couple of years, I guess, a couple of years ago, there was a silo between the CDN. The CDN began at the origin server.
Yeah.
And then the cloud, i.e. the compute and storage, was its own separate thing. And the cloud could be wherever it was. It could be, infrastructure I'm running in my own data centers. It could be one of the big public clouds. It could be, whatever. But, but there was this, they were siloed, right? They were walled off. CDN began at the origin. Cloud was its own separate thing. Cloud would do what it did, encode the file, package it. Once it dumped it to the origin, then the CDN did its thing, but they were like two completely separate, distinct systems, right?
All coming together and interlinking with each other.
So that's what I was curious, is so, and that's largely what you built by the virtue of you have bare metal that is sitting right on the CDN.
Correct.
I mean, it's right there. So then it's kind of like, well, wait a second, where does the CDN start and the cloud end? Or let's even remove the word cloud. Let's just say compute.
Yes.
Where does compute end and the cloud begin, and vice versa? So you see that really merging to where the network is now the computing platform and the distribution platform, it sounds like.
Correct. I think the future is really that converged infrastructure, as we would like to
Mm,
call it. You
mm,
don't think of the components, as you mentioned earlier, in product silos anymore,
mm.
because with the increased demands and the focus on your users, on the performance, on the costs, you need to break down these silos and combine all the advantages of the individual products and
Yeah,
make them together as
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, we see things moving, very much in the same direction. I think it's just opening up. It's going to open up tremendous opportunities to do. I'm really excited. Like you said earlier in our conversation. It's like, this is exciting stuff. It's exciting times, and I really feel the same way. The ability now to provide interactive experiences and to deliver quality that we only dreamed of, even just 5 or 6 years ago, which isn't that long ago actually, is coming, and it's coming fast. And with generative AI, and you mentioned like these game engines,
Yeah.
what they're going to be able to do for producing, AI, avatars and all kinds of experiences that are
Yeah.
just going to be just incredible.
Exactly.
And I see a blending even, this is I think a little bit further out, but I see a blending where even the whole notion of like watching a movie that it has been completed and the storyline's written, and like we're going to be making our own movies on the fly, in these engines and in these experiences. Yeah, it still will be actors that we're
Yeah.
directing, and maybe in time we'll be able to put ourselves in the movie, but just that ability to create these interactive experiences, how cool,
Yeah.
how fun, how
I feel we're really
transformative.
at the beginning of this transformation.
Yeah.
Like we've all seen that now with what's possible with AI and movie generation. When you go
Yeah.
to YouTube and see some of these movies, still shorts,
Yeah.
with how quick that is, how quick the evolution is on that level of technology. What you
Yeah.
just mentioned, probably in a few years from now, we'll just send up like a 10-minute selfie of each other, video, send it to the platform. You type
Yeah.
in, prompt in the movie that you want to be in, and you'll be
Yeah.
there. It's like a
And you'll
Star Trek
be there.
holodeck experience being made
Yeah.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, Stefan, thank you for joining. Again, this episode of Voices of Video is great having you back. We're very excited. We are going to be hosting you guys again. That is i3D. In the IBC booth, the
Yes.
NETINT IBC booth, and we're very excited about that. And I know we're going to be even upping, what we do together. There's going to be, some more presentations. And so, that's actually not so far out. I mean, before you know it, summer will be gone, September will
And then
be
it's
here, and
September. Yes.
IBC is here. So, so for those who attend IBC, you definitely will want to make sure you come by the NetInt booth so that you can talk to i3D, and really experience and see firsthand, the power of the platform.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, as we like to wrap up Voices of Video, happy encoding. And yeah, happy encoding and happy streaming and happy delivery
Yeah.
of
And
all
happy
types.
gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Happy gaming. Yeah. All right. In all seriousness, thank you for listening and supporting and watching Voices of Video.